So Liz, I am so excited to have you here on our program. I've been really anxious to talk about what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Jill. I know it's been months in the making, so I'm excited to talk about orgasms once again.
Yes. I kind of am too. I have lots of questions around this. So obviously you and I have met through CES. And so I have a story about that, but I first want to hear a little bit of background about you and your like foray into, sexual wellness for women.
Yeah, so basically, I'm Liz Klinger. I'm co-founder and CEO of Lioness, and yeah, as you mentioned, I'm in the sexual wellness space. And it's like you don't have a degree or a specific path to go down sexual wellness or to one day make vibrators, much less smart vibrators. But how the sort of the nutshell of how I got into all this is I basically, at one point I was selling different intimacy products to women through, it was passion parties at the time. And with that, I got into that because I had been always curious about sexuality and pleasure. And I had all these questions, and I always just thought that I was kind of this weird person with all these questions. And when I started taking these sort of like passion parties into people's homes, and also colleges, and as bachelorette parties, retirement parties, neighborhood parties,
Retirement, I love that. Retirement.
Oh yeah. I mean, you could make a sex toy party out of any sort of party. And this is basically, I'd come in with different products and show people the different types of products that are out there. People would ask questions, they'd buy things. So that's kind of the feel of it, just for the context of what, these sex toy parties are. And what I found with, when I was starting to do these parties was almost every single party I do, there'd be a couple of people who would, usually it's like, they take me to the side in a, corner room somewhere, and they'd start asking me all these different questions that they had never asked anyone else before.
Right.
Just everything from, your, like, what is a G-spot? How do I have an orgasm? How do I talk about this with my partner? Or even at the time I was like in my early 20s. It was like, I get questions from people about, menopause and how sex and pleasure changes during menopause.
Really?
And yeah. And I know that it's a very important topic, and it's one that a lot of women experience. But at the time I was like, my early 20s, I didn't have a background in this. And I was like, I don't feel qualified to answer this, but I can point to different resources, and, I can, at the time it's like, well, I know X, Y, and Z, or these books or these doctors that you can start doing some research on. And basically it was like, I found that all these people had all these questions. I was often the first person that they'd ask these questions because I created the space to ask these questions and to have these conversations. And a lot of these questions had a lot of impact on, people's day-to-day lives, in terms of people's happiness or their self-confidence or their relationship with their partner. Like if if you have some trouble and you have a question that's gnawing at you and you don't know where to ask, it just simmers. And, it's just something that, just kind of eats away at you at times. So it was great to be able to be this resource and be this person there to answer some of these questions or to point to different places. So that was just something that was really fulfilling for me. I wanted to do more. And that's how, step by step, it ended up becoming Lioness with the personal, the sort of, it's a vibrator, but it's also this way to personally consult and explore people's pleasure on their own terms and at their own time.
That's great. Yeah, I think having that safe space where, and they feel like they can ask you, it's kind of like, asking the doctor or asking the professional, like they feel like they have that comfort. is really important. So hopefully we'll be able to sort of create that a little bit here, and talk about some of the questions that some of our listeners have, and I have had as well. So now your whole Lioness, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, but was a technology, a very, a smart technology. So in other words, it speaks and it does other things via data. So when you are interested in sort of getting your product out there, Liz, and really speaking to the consumer, direct to the consumer, I know, I should say I had heard that you wanted to participate in the Consumer Electronics Show, which is the largest consumer electronics show in the world, where everyone launches their sort of consumer brands. And when what happened the first year when you applied?
Well, Jill, we were turned down.
What was the reasoning?
It was weird. So so it was one of those things where it's sort of a backdoor conversation that they don't want in writing. And
right. Like this is not appropriate for this show. Go down the street kind of thing.
Got it. That was basically the response. So the year before this past CES show, for context, the 2020 CES show was actually the first time that companies were allowed to exhibit that were doing something related to sex tech in some sort of way. Which is really why I brought this up, because the reason I brought it up was not to knock CES, right? They just hadn't had those things before. So it's really more to talk about the growth that has occurred in awareness around these devices not being considered pornography or something. I don't know what the words are, but not being that, and the evolution. So I think you're great to speak about it. So let us know about your experience. Yeah. So this was So this is for the 2018 CES. Since I'm trying to remember, it's been enough years, and I'm like, wait a second, where brain work for me, please. Right. So basically, we had applied. We sort of applied several times and tried to figure out what's the reasoning? Why is this so difficult? And they basically said that, we don't know if it's appropriate. We're not accepting any new sex related categories into the show. So I learned also that several other companies that create products related to sexual wellness had also applied in the past and weren't able to get in either. So it's been this sort of quiet thing that's been brewing for over the past decade, practically, of just new companies who haven't been able to come in. This wasn't, I was persistent about it though, because it was just frustrating to see that my team has built this amazing technology that can really change people's experiences of pleasure, but also there's this potential that we're starting to see now of how understanding your pleasure can impact your health, or your relationships, or even your health more broadly, which I can get into a little bit more in a bit. Yeah. But it was just we're not, the message was basically go to AVN, or go to the porn shows, which we can go to the porn shows, but also because of our brand and because of the product and our particular product being more data and research oriented, we're just this. It makes sense to also be in a space for consumers and in a space with healthcare professionals, and being able to talk about sex not just in the context of pornography. Sex is so much more than just porn. So I was determined, and I, through some of my Berkeley and Stanford connections, I actually got a space last minute in the show, and we kind of went stealth in the show, on the official show floor for 2018. Wow. And just because I wanted to meet people, I wanted to make connections. Yeah. And you can't do that if if you can't be on the show floor. So it was definitely worthwhile to do. Like, I was a little bit like, oh my God, like, are they, am I going to get kicked out? I did have a couple Gold Star members come by and be like, why aren't you at the show across the street? And I'm like, I've met some great people here. I've met you. You seem like a great person too.
Yeah, it's but to me the most exciting part is last year, because it was in the section that I am part of, which is the digital health part. We were always pushing for this as well. At the same time, we understood that it wasn't as accepted there. So I was very excited last year when they opened up an area really within healthcare, digital health, or health and wellness, as the floor area is called, and really saw the growth even within 1 year. It was crazy to see you guys and some other companies doing really interesting things, and things for public floor and whatever. So anyway, we can move on from that, but I'm so excited. I was really excited to have you there. And that's really cool. So tell me a little bit about, when you're researching, when you choose to like research, stepping beyond the parties that you had and now moving into, wow, what can I do to move this movement forward and help women? What were some of the challenges you faced in discovering these things and sort of aligning that with technology?
Yeah, I think it was really where to begin when you make anything. It's like it's pretty easy to make a better mousetrap for things, but is that actually going to resonate? And
right.
So when we got started with building out Lioness, one of the things I wanted to make sure of was to start as broad as possible.
Right.
Like, with the question, not just like, how do you make a better vibrator or how do you make a better XYZ? Because it's that kind of limits your thinking in terms of what you can do. So we started with the question of how do you make pleasure, or how do you make experiences for people better, for women in particular, but anyone with a vagina, how do you make their experiences better, sexually speaking? So at first it was exploring, like, we're starting to think about like, okay, a lot of vibrators are actually pretty difficult to operate. Like, there's a lot of buttons, there's a lot of controls, you can, it's easy to tinker. And at every single party, there was always some moment where someone had trouble turning off a vibrator. And then they'd be like, oh my God, like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, this is such an uncomfortable moment. I don't know. And it, like, I always felt kind of bad because it's, it's a pretty vulnerable moment to, try to figure out something that you think would be basic, but is actually not. So there was things like that. There are things like different people have different preferences for stimulation. Everyone's bodies are, everyone's kind of different in terms of our own bodies, our own experiences, where you might mentally be when you're in the moment. Like, there's all these different things. And our first thought was, how do we create something maybe that can adjust or adapt itself to different people's experiences? So it can be an easier and smoother experience overall, and people can enjoy themselves more. So that was what we did at first. Yeah, like, I think in terms of your question more directly, like some of the challenges. Some people have asked, like, oh, was it difficult to get feedback, for people to open up about the topic, or, to really to get to design stuff.
To share something that's going on with them. Yeah, really personal.
Yeah. And it wasn't as difficult as you think it might be. Mm-hmm. I mean, it wasn't like something where I'd post, you wouldn't post on Facebook and be like, hey, what do you think of, if I made this, or how would I make this question as awkward as possible? It's like, like, I didn't post out questions on Facebook or something like that, because people are generally not going to answer there. But if you do like a one-on-one, you have a project you're working on, you kind of lay out the questions, what are we looking for? What's the purpose? Like, people tend a lot of different people tend to open up about what, about just, the questions that you have, like what they're looking for, what questions they've had, different things like that. So when we,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So I guess going into, I was going to talk a little bit more about the design process in terms of like, we went from having this like idea of automation and automating the experience to make it so that it's smoother. You don't have to think about things as much. But what we found from that was most people tend to like something that's fairly consistent. Like they have like one or two settings that they tend to like, and they don't really move away from that in terms of like different intensities of stimulation. But what we did find over time, and we're starting to ask all these different questions, was people were interested in information about themselves. We had the sense.
Give me some examples, like what works for them, where their body responded. When you talk about information about themselves, what were they saying we want?
So there was a lot of, there was just a lot of fascination on data about yourself during sex. So there's some people who are like, oh, that's really how long I masturbate. Like that's not as long as I thought it was. Like, especially for people who like sometimes take a longer time, or, it can get kind of, it's like things are not, it's, like 45 minutes, or it feels like 45 minutes or an hour. And you're like, oh my God, like, are things working or not? Like what's going on? Why is this not working? Why does it work for everyone else? And it's like, no, it's only like 20 minutes. And that's within a pretty average range for most people. Like, so you're, it's like, you're fine. That is normal. It's like almost this like reaffirmation that your experience is normal, and you're not weird. There isn't something wrong. But it's also just a nice contextual thing for people as they're exploring themselves.
Right.
Or like another one that was like, that kind of cinched it for us, that we're like, we're going to go down this, sort of 23andMe for sexuality sort of path, was in our early prototyping, we had a husband and wife who were beta testing and participating in this. And at the time we were just like sending PDFs back and forth of the charts. So like they had this like really old, like, or 3D printed hand-built prototype that we created, and we'd send it over to them, and then they'd send it back to us, and we'd have to like upload the data and email it to them in the form of a PDF. So like very early, this is like beta testing, prototyping type of stuff. We sent the charts to the wife, who was the main tester. And basically, she came back to us and was like, this is really cool. And also I realized that I could share this with my husband. And we had this conversation about foreplay, because I didn't know this stuff before, but what she started to talk about with me was she had this like issue with like, she wanted more foreplay. He didn't quite, wasn't quite communicating, and they didn't, it was like a point of contention for them, because they're like, I'm, like this should,
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about when people are married. And I think most women and most people, I'm probably being a little general here, but think of needing a vibrator when you're not married. So do you find that there's this, like a generalization around that? And is there like some contention between men and women in the marriage, if that exists?
Sometimes, like, I have heard with like some people are afraid of incorporating vibrators into a relationship or into a sexual practice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting, because for like what I've seen, at least so I'll keep it in the context of like a heterosexual relationship, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
where a boyfriend or a husband might be uncomfortable with including a vibrator in foreplay or during sex. what I've heard from, at least from speaking to some guys about this who had this belief, was it was sort of this like competition for them, that they didn't feel like they were good enough. And what I usually tell them, and people who have this concern, is at least with, so there's sort of two pieces of it. At least with the Lioness, because of the Lioness vibrator, because it has this data that it tells you, it can tell you about a person's experience, what they like and what they don't like, or what they could like, different things that you can try. So it can, it's almost this helper for you that can
discovery.
Give you
it helps you discover.
Because like going back to that real quick, to that example with the husband and wife, who they're like, in this case, they're fairly comfortable with sex. They were able to talk, they include vibrators and different sex toys in their relationship. The thing that they still had different topics that they had trouble talking about. And when they had this chart with data, she presented it as like, hey, on a good day with a vibrator, so it's a bit faster. And when I'm in a good mood, like it just takes me 5 minutes to go, from beginning to climax. Like that's really all. And then he saw it and he's like, oh yeah, it's a chart. Like, I get that.
It's proof. I got the data. Yeah.
Yes. But like, it's kind of, poke fun at like, yeah, nerdy people looking at charts, haha, but I think the thing that we really all learned from that was we were like, by recontextualizing the topic of sex and pleasure and taking it from, what it is, to talking about it like it's, it's another biological function. Like, basically by being able to talk about sex and pleasure as, it's almost like it's just another aspect of our lives. It's like, it's like exercise. It's like sleeping. It's like, our diets, our nutrition, and being able to see it as numbers and visuals and graphs and being able to see it in these different forms can help change how people see the topic and how they discuss it and think about it with other people. I mean, I think you kind of get it in a sense of like it helps take away some of the stigma and the sting of like, hey, this isn't just like a, I think I kind of get it. There's sort of this like, a lot of abstraction when you're talking about sex a lot of times, of like, I kind of like this or I kind of like that. But you have this sort of like something like,
it's a bodily function. It's like a function of our bodies, just like eating and digesting food, that it's like part of the function. It just happens to have this added benefit.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's
as a happier ending.
Yes. Yeah. So it like really changed the context for them, that they're able to have this conversation and have it in a different, like have it in a way where it was different than the, 100 times that they had talked about this.
Right.
And for him, like he was able to see like, okay, it's not, well, after a while he thought that she was not saying something that, or like there's something wrong, and, she was not, or maybe there, or even if it's like, I don't know, relationships can get complicated where it's like, it's not, maybe there is something wrong, but I don't know, or maybe she's not attracted enough to him. And then on her side, it was like, is he listening? Like, is he, does he actually get it? I don't know how else to explain this. And it's, it's really frustrating.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense now that you're saying it, that it's sort of like helping break down the barriers even within a relationship. I mean, there's all the people that aren't in relationships that are also, have needs, but in the relationship one, I always thought that was going to be a challenging area, although I shouldn't, because sex toys have been around for a long time in relationships, but really just trying to understand that a little bit more. Let's talk a little bit about health in regards to pleasure. I've always been sort of, I call it like the science of pleasure. Not that I know what that means, but like is there a direct correlation between this type of pleasure, like this type of orgasm or just excitement or pleasure that correlates directly to benefiting our health?
Oh my gosh. that is my favorite subject.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So one of the things with Lioness that we really found that like our team, a lot of our team enjoys it. We've written different blog posts about this that are on our website, but also our customers as well, is being able to try different things and see how that affects our experiences of pleasure. So like one of my co-founders, she even like is able to see like how coffee can impact her experience of pleasure. Just as like, it's like we drink coffee every single day, and it's just something that you don't really think too much about because you're like, oh, I need to wake up, like I need my coffee, or at least for me, or you might be tea drinkers. Like I'm not gonna, it's a whole thing, but basically that even something like that can have an impact on your experience of pleasure and your orgasms and how easy or difficult it could be. But even looking beyond that too, we're starting to look at for Lioness, like how do other aspects of health impact your pleasure or impact your orgasms, and also vice versa. What sort of signs can you see from your experience of pleasure that might be another sign of something going on with your body, or something that your body's trying to say, but you're not, sometimes it's not always obvious, at least the first time around. And one of the really interesting things that we kind of witnessed early on with when we had first launched the product was we had a customer who wrote in, and she said that her data looked extremely different from what her typical baseline data looks like. And she thought that the vibrator was broken. So we did our, you have your customer your vibrator customer service, and you have your questions, you make sure you had it plugged in, and, all that stuff, and then we had her send in the product because everything checked out, and we wanted to see like what's, is there something going on, because this is a new issue that we've found, or that we haven't encountered this before.
So just interrupt one quick. So you take a baseline before you do anything, is what you're saying when you said it's different from her baseline? Where was she getting her baseline?
So for her so baseline, in the sense of, people tend to have sort of a general, like it's a little bit different for everybody, but a sort of general pattern of like what their behaviors are or how things work. So it could be like, there's different orgasm patterns, there's different sort of general time frames of orgasm that people may have, or length of session overall. So stuff like that. So
her experience was different previous to this. Okay.
Yeah. So as a quick thing, her orgasms normally are like this. So it's just like, pretend it's a chart. It's like just sort of a spike in a graph. And it's like, this is an orgasm, and then the after the climax, and then it began just being practically flatline. Like it was just like, kind of almost going up and then not. So we were like, what's going on here? Since we're hoping that it was like, maybe it's an easy tech fix, or it's warranty replacement or something like that. But we didn't see anything different with the vibrator. But when we did the checks, and we were like, okay, we don't know what's going on. We're, sending it back to see if maybe, something could, trying to figure out like, maybe something or I don't know. We're very confused. But when we tried to send it back to her, we had trouble getting in touch. And we found out that she had actually, she had recently had a concussion. And she emailed about a month later and was like, I've been staying away from, trying to minimize my time on computers and phones because of the bright lights. And we were like, oh, we had started to look at different topics related to sex and orgasms and alcohol and cannabis and different sort of mental effects. So we then asked, when did the concussion happen? And turns out the concussion had lined up with when the data started to look different.
Oh, so what was going on health-wise with herself was affecting ultimately her pleasure and orgasm experience.
Yeah. And so I guess sort of the funny thing in a way was that she had this concussion, and she got it from she's an athlete basically. So it was a sports related concussion, and she'd wanted to go back and, do her sport again, because she's like, it's my thing. It's, I love doing this. I love being on the field. But when we all of us kind of figured out that it was that the orgasm data was probably related to her concussion, she was like, oh man, I should actually sit out. Maybe I should actually take this more seriously, because yeah, it's giving me headaches. It's, I'm having all these issues, but it's also affecting my orgasms, and they're really shitty orgasms. Yeah. So in a way it was kind of good that all happened, because she took a little more time to recover, versus trying to just go out back into the field immediately, just from seeing this orgasm data that looked different, and it also felt different for her too.
Yeah, let's flip it to orgasm and its effect on your health, or just pleasure in general, that type of sexual pleasure and your health. Are you seeing direct correlation there between benefits, there's actual physical benefits for you?
Basically, it's like masturbation and sex and orgasms and all those good things. They can affect your stress and anxiety. Sometimes it can be a good stress and coping mechanism, especially with short-term bouts of anxiety and stress. It can help you get more in touch with your body and have a sense of what's working for you, knowing what you like, and having more confidence and comfort in knowing the things that you like. It's sort of exercise in the sense of it works up your cardiovascular system, your circulatory system, and it's not quite the same thing as running or doing weights or things like that, but it gets the body moving in different ways that you may not be doing if you're just sitting in front of a computer desk. And also it helps with there's some, I'm trying to remember the exact studies on this, but basically masturbation and having an orgasm, having orgasms and masturbating, or having sex on some sort of consistent basis, whatever that means is up to the individual, can help you have more consistent pleasure more reliably. So having an orgasm in a way can help you more reliably have orgasms in the future, which can be especially good as you're if you're finding that you're if things are changing for you, or your life's going a little bit inconsistent, if you have this as sort of this routine thing that you can do now and then, every couple of days, couple of weeks, whatever sort of everyone's a little bit different in terms of what's sort of their sweet spot, but having that sort of consistency and doing it can help you remember, and your body sort of remember how to keep doing it, so you don't lose it or you don't forget, and then you kind of are in this wait, how does this all work again? Sometimes.
Well, it's like riding a bike. It actually sounds a little bit like you're sort of training your body a little bit to be more responsive, and so I talk a lot about the importance of creating these rituals and routines, to whether it's 10 minutes on a bike or whatever it is, right? So every single day, it could be creating a new skincare routine, whatever those things are. Sounds like this might be something we need to put in our schedules as a reminder, because it's so easy to sort of forget, and yet to me, it sounds like, and interestingly enough, I would imagine during COVID and all of us being sort of, at home so much and not doing as much, being out and about, but it sounds like it could be really something that's really beneficial to help us with mental health stuff and anxiety and things that are going on with us, as well as Get the blood flowing.
Yeah. I mean, I see it more as as meditation in a way. Like there's a lot of overlap between creating a meditation practice and creating a sort of self-pleasure or self-care type of practice, because there isn't really like with meditation, you don't have like a specific goal of like, I'm going to become like a monk or a yogi, like, or I don't know, there isn't like a tangible goal for it, but it does help in a variety of different ways in terms of like managing stress and anxiety and getting more in tune with what is going on with your body. Right. And masturbation and sex are very similar in that it helps you get in touch with your body and like get a sense of what's going on and what you like, or if something is different, what might be going on around you. And that's I think really been it's been a big benefit in my life too, in terms of like having a lioness and having these different ways of being able to kind of see what's going on with myself in a given moment, especially especially right now, if I'm super stressed with, everything going on in the world and with the, COVID and fires and everything. Like it's a way for me to kind of see like, okay, how am I doing? How am I doing in all of this? Like, what's being impacted, and, what should I do to make myself feel better, be it, masturbation or diet or whatever.
Like nurturing yourself. I mean, it's like self-discovery. I do love that. And that's kind of what I love about technology right now, and sort of this convergence into things that we wouldn't have thought had any business being partners. Let's talk a little bit about, as we get older, the changes that start to happen with our bodies that affect our own sex drive, the way we experience our partners or our solo experiences, but kind of what's going on in our bodies as we reach certain ages that affect our sexual wellness.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic, because it's not one that gets enough attention, quite frankly. There isn't that much conversation about sex or pleasure, and there's even less for people as they get older, even though a lot of us get older if we're lucky, Yeah, so one of the things that we're still early in this process, but one of the things that we're doing is we recently just launched a Lioness sex research platform.
Okay.
So it's a way for users to, if they're interested, they're curious to try, more things. They can participate in different studies led by doctors and scientists and researchers at nonprofit institutions who are looking into these different questions. One of the first topics that we have on this platform is on the topic of menopause and pleasure, because it's an interesting topic. It's one that we think needs more attention and needs more examination. So we don't have any sort of conclusive the researcher is still working on analyzing the data from it, but what I can say is we worked with an array of different women who are all in perimenopause or menopause, and looked at different backgrounds in terms of race, in terms of age, since some of the people who participated had hysterectomies and they entered early menopause. And also, I guess as we kind of learn more about things, like we just realized like just how many different experiences people had as they got older and as they started to enter menopause, and how that has a bigger or sometimes not even that big of an impact on their own experiences. So that's something I'm really excited to see, of like how does the body impact your life and your sex life, your overall well-being, but then also how do the experiences around you also impact your life?
Like I would imagine all of the hormonal changes that are going on, you know, in your 40s, then you get up into your 50s. I mean, some people go through early menopause, but, you know, early 50s is kind of general consensus for like perimenopause to menopause, and even in the 40s, I should say, and then, or upper 40s. And I would imagine, you know, I'm hearing a lot about different things that are changing in women. Some are having painful sex, and of course then they have no interest in it. Some are losing the drive, period, like it's gone. And then I would think you would need to nurture that back, because it's easy to just dismiss it as, well, this is the next part of my life, and I don't need sex. I don't need orgasm. I don't need that anymore. It's okay. Do you have any thoughts around that?
Oh, I have a few.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's difficult with talking about sex and sex drive and changes over time is that there's different reasons why things will change for people. And yeah, there's the body, and you know, there's aging, there's hormonal changes. There's also changes in your relationship, whether good, positive, or negative. There's also changes in your, and there's also changes in your health too. Like one of the things that we're really excited about with the possibility of this research platform is I'm actively seeking someone who's like sort of a cardiologist or someone who studies like heart health, who wants to look at the relationship between heart health and sex drive and pleasure. Because for men's health, or you know, for people with penises, one of the things that became a pretty significant thing in healthcare was the discovery of erectile dysfunction medications. Because with the introduction of Viagra and Cialis and, you know, all these other pills, and seeing the effect on sex drive and on arousal, there is also this sort of light bulb moment of, hey, if some guy's coming into the doctor, say, and he's asking for the little blue pill, maybe in some cases there might be other circulatory problems or cardiovascular problems with this individual that the doctor can then ask his follow-up questions of, like, you know, hey, you know, how's your
Something
exercise
else,
routine?
What else is going on, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So the crazy thing to me that's been like driving me mad for a few years now is that there isn't the same sort of research and discussion and understanding of something equivalent for women. Like if you find, for instance, that your sex drive is not as great as it used to be, like you check all the other, there's other things that could impact it. So it's not necessarily just health or heart health or, things like that, but that hasn't really been part of the conversation in the same way that it has been for men. And for more men, like being able to think about like, hey, if I have trouble having, keeping it up, like there might be other things going on. Similarly for women, it can be the same thing. Like we want more research on that. So it can be like this, definitively like, hey, if something changes with your sex drive, or if you have difficulties getting to orgasm that you used to, this could be something to consider of like, maybe there's something going on with your circulatory health or your heart health. And that's something that you can also work on. You'll be healthier, and also you'll have better orgasms too, as another benefit. But yeah, it's just this like crazy thing to me that because the topic of female pleasure is, especially doing anything with devices and like looking at the body and the effects, it's considered sort of a taboo topic by enough people that we're not able to look at questions like this and see like, hey, how does this have an effect on women? Even considering that heart attacks are the leading cause of death for women in the US. Like it seems like this is important to look at. Like, I may be wrong, but I don't think it's completely crazy either. So it's something that I'm hoping, with the research platform, that we can have questions like that start to be examined more thoroughly, and have more of these conversations out there, like with the medical community and the scientific community, and then also have that information disseminated to you and me, so we can, it's something in the back of our minds that if something's going on, there's a bunch of different reasons, and that might be one of them, and that particular one might actually impact your life, like literally.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because, I remember I've dealt with depression, and I remember when I started taking a certain type of medication, that it completely decreased sex drive. And there's a lot of people who went off medication because of it. So I think really understanding what the effect is of certain things on our health. I think or what might be causing lack of sex drive, what might be causing these things. I think it's really important. I think it's really important for our women to understand this, and for them to, I personally think it's an important part of being a woman and feeling lovely.
Yeah.
But I think that really understanding it more is critical, because that way, as we embark on these next years of our lives and we talk about living these, that we have so many great things to live for, the more we understand, the better, and the more sort of prepared we can be to live it up.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that, a lot of things blow my mind with this topic, but like one of the things that I think we don't realize unless you really start digging into all the information that currently exists out there, is scientific research on women is still relatively a new thing. So like a lot of research on like drug testing, on health, like different, health and medical testing has been predominantly on men. Because the reason being was, at least early on, women were seen as like too much of a random variable in experiments, because we have these menstrual cycles that, that can change our bodies a lot. From month to month. So you want to have something more stable.
We're totally unreliable is what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that was the reasoning at the time for especially for like testing medications. Mm-hmm. But then what happened was, as more and more of these medications are being tested and put out to market, women are affected by medications in different ways than men are, because our bodies are different, hormones are different, we weight and, all these other sort of factors. And with like Ambien as one of those prime examples, one of many, with Ambien, for instance, they're finding that when women were given the equivalent dose of Ambien that men were for a sleep medication, they were much more likely to just like wake up in the middle of the night, or seem like they're awake, but they're not, but they're like sleepwalking and in between these like weird, in some weird sleep cycle. And it was just all these like really weird effects that were coming out because they weren't studying these. Yeah. It was just not seen as it was seen as too costly to include women and, to include different people in these studies. So when it's changed more recently, like there's been more push to include more women and to include more, to have a more diverse sample of people in these studies. We're still pretty far. It's a work in progress, but it's something to keep in mind with some of the studies and some of the information that's out there, that there isn't enough information, especially if you're a woman, if you're a minority, you're not a white person, like the studies and the research that's out there on some of these, there's less of it. So it's, I think, especially important to be able to have different ways to like if you have questions about different aspects of your life, be it sex or be it nutrition, and if if you feel sick or you're not feeling, you're just not feeling good about yourself, like it's great to have these tools available because you can get data that's about yourself, and then you can make certain decisions based on that, as opposed to just purely relying on just, whatever is out there that may not be sufficient for you.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'm starting to see a theme in some of the discussions I'm having around the lack of support around women's health, and minorities, people of color. I mean, it's women of color. It's sad. I hope that we can start. I want you to give us sort of the skinny on the lioness and what it does. Why is it so special, and why has it been receiving so many great reviews and people using it? And I'd love to hear a little bit from you on that.
Yeah. So Lioness is it's a smart vibrator. And what that is for people on the podcast, I'm opening up a box and the lioness is inside. It's, so at least on face value, at first it looks like a typical vibrator, but inside is a suite of different sensors that can actually pick up on your own arousal and orgasm. And it's there's a couple different sensors in here. One that measures the star of the show, I like to say, measures your pelvic floor movement. So vaginal contractions that happen during arousal and orgasm. So how you use it is you use it like a typical vibrator, and you have the vibrations going and the sensors going, and when there's a session that you want to see, you can go to the app and you can see what happened.
So let me back up for 1 second. So when you say smart, just so I make sure everyone understands this, smart is that it's communicating. It's communicating and sending data. It's sensing something, and the sensors are doing what they do best, is sense, and they're sending that data to, in this case, an application. Right. There's lots of smart devices. So I just wanted to clear up the smart part.
Right. Yeah. There's smart's a very vague word, especially with sex toys. So this is how Lioness is smart. So yeah, what the data is basically it's the pelvic floor data. But what is the particularly interesting part of the data is it's usually the arousal, the buildup, and the orgasm. The orgasm is a particular pattern of pelvic floor movements. So it's a particular rhythm that a human cannot replicate on their own. It's about 1 to 2 hertz. So it's pretty rapid. So it's something that you can't just sort of try to make up yourself. And I have the chart here for people who are watching this, but more importantly for podcast people, I have a translation of that chart to sound, so you can hear what an orgasm or orgasm data can sound like.
Ooh, play that.
That's just, yeah.
On a carnival ride.
So it's a sort of up and down this rapid motion, and then it starts tapering off after a couple of seconds. So
that's great.
Yeah.
So we've recorded not just the climax, but we've recorded what's taken to get there. I'm sure there's a better scientific term than that. So is there a learning that's going on, or is this just us to sort of understand, like, is the device learning, or are there things that we can discover about ourselves when looking at that data?
So it's really more about, there's different things that you can discover about yourself from having this data. So you have, along with the sort of the physiological data that it's recording, you can add different notes and tags about the experience. So you can remember, like, did I have that cup of coffee this morning? Or did I have a glass of wine? Or was I using this by myself or with a partner? Was I stressed or relaxed? Like all the different, factors that might be impacting your experience. Or some people just use it as like more of a sex diary of sorts. So, you can kind of have fun with it, and you can pretty much put whatever is interesting that you want to track about yourself. So the benefit really of this data really comes from starting to see a few sessions over time and seeing like, how are things changing? How are things different? Like if I feel awful, like, do I see that in, my masturbation session? Or if the other direction sort of happens too, where if like things start feeling not so great, like, is there something else going on in my life that I may not be really realizing because I'm so busy with 100 other things in my life. But, maybe this chart or this like session that's different from my usual there might be some meaning to it beyond just like, oh, it's not just, a bad orgasm or a bad session, but there might be something else going on that I could be more attuned to. So, with like mental health or whatnot.
Something else that's going on. Talk a little bit briefly about the physiological data. What is it capturing?
Yeah. So the star of the show really is, it's basically the pelvic floor contractions, or usually it's the vaginal contractions. So there's a specific pattern of contractions that a person, everybody actually experiences, both men and women experience during orgasm, which is about it's that rhythmic sound that I had just played on the app. So it's just like this very rhythmic motion that a person experiences during orgasm. And then something else that of course, there's not enough research in the space and we need better understanding of it, but we're also starting to see that there's a sort of pattern and behavior that is also associated with arousal and building up to a climax as well, that people can start seeing for themselves. So they can start seeing like, what are certain changes in their experience? Did they like that or not? And start building towards what is a good experience versus staying away from experiences that they may not like as much. And for the nerdy people out there, there's also other sensors too, not just the force sensors, because there's a lot of stuff that has to go into this to make it work well. So there's also a gyroscope and accelerometer. So that's basically angles and motion. So that corresponds with, you can kind of filter out what's movement, so that you can figure out, you can kind of parse out what's movement versus what's movement from the body. There's also a temperature sensor, which can basically for this purpose helps automate the entire process. So you don't have extra buttons or things to do to operate the vibrator or the tracking. Yeah, it's more the biofeedback and data, and being able to see what's happening and being able to change your experience based on what you are seeing and what you see about yourself in general.
So it's putting you in the driver's seat.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, it's giving you the power to create a better experience for yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Or your partner, or your yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I'm talking to the single girls right now, but like, yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, I am really interested to hear how the research platform, what you guys learned from that. I think that is, I'm a little bit of a data gal, so I love, ultimately that's where we kind of prove things out, right? So I'm really excited for, hopefully our listeners will get this.
So what the Lioness is so on face value, looks like a typical vibrator, but inside there's a suite of different sensors that can help you visualize your own arousal and orgasms. And through biofeedback and data on an app, you basically use a vibrator like a typical vibrator, and then when you have a session that you want to see, you can see what happened right on the app here. And the benefit of that is basically knowledge is power and better orgasms. So the more you know, the better it gets. So it's a great tool to learn more about your pleasure, or for you and your partner to experiment also and see what works. So you can just have a better sense of what works for you and how your pleasure changes from a variety of different factors that we're going to be talking about during this podcast.
Liz is offering our listeners a discount, which we will put in the show notes, for this sort of Rolls Royce of vibrators. And hopefully you guys will opt into the research platform as well to help provide some great data. I mean, obviously it's all privacy, encrypted
Opt-in,
and insured and opt-in and all of that sort of stuff. So before we close this out, Liz, because this has been a really fun discussion, I would love to know, what is the one ritual in your day that you never forget to do, and why?
It's a good question. I think, well, this is more every other day, but
okay.
Yeah, water my plants. It gets me outside. I get to look at my flowers. Oh yeah, I have I just moved to a new place, and I have a nice yard. I went from a studio to like a place with a yard, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm
like a home.
Things. Yeah, like I have so many things I can do now. It's amazing. So I have, I've been nurturing these roses and dahlias, especially during quarantine and, during this time. Like, it's nice to have something to nurture, and something that's nice to, it's nice to look at. I'm starting to get into hybridizing roses and dahlias.
Oh, wow.
Propagating. Yeah. So it's a whole, so I'm just getting into the sort of the nuts and bolts of raising plants, and just seeing what I can do with it. Yeah.
That's a good habit. That's a good habit. I love that.
It keeps me away from the wine and the other stuff too. So it's sort of, that's kind of how I see it sometimes as well. Of just like it helps me build some good habits, and I get outside, I get sun. I love it. It's a nice thing to do.
Well, I cannot wait to share this with the audience, and I really think that I think this is an important part of what women deserve as they get older, and really sort of starting to learn and understand our bodies a little bit better, and not being so, I don't know if the word is tight-lipped or quiet about it, but at least being able to learn from those in the know about how this is affecting our bodies, what's going on as we age, and how can we still, retain and regain pleasure in our lives through sexual experiences. So I love this. Thank you so much, Liz. I really, really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Jill. Always happy to talk about this stuff.
Awesome.